You know him, you better love him. It's SpongeBob Squarepants.
I'm ready!
SpongeBob Squarepants is a series that is deeply intertwined with the culture of Gen Z. And it makes sense. The show first aired in 1999, meaning that we grew up with the jovial anthropomorphic sea sponge. But even though SpongeBob has been airing for 27 years and counting, longtime fans have been denouncing the series. Posts talking about how funny SpongeBob is are often qualified with, but only seasons 1 through 3. Despite this, SpongeBob still remains one of the most popular cartoon characters of all time. As of this video, SpongeBob SquarePants is going on its 17th season, and the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants dropped about a month and a half ago. Suffice to say, SpongeBob is still profitable whether longtime fans are watching the series or not. So what's really going on here? In today's lecture, I will be covering what made SpongeBob so popular and impactful to Gen Z, and what the evolution of the series says about children's content today.
I'm in the middle of a coffee-fueled sermon right now. You can't afford to miss this information.
In my humble opinion, about 20% of SpongeBob's success can be attributed to Nickelodeon. Airing on Nickelodeon in 1999 instantly put SpongeBob on TVs across the world, because at that point, Nickelodeon had already established their international versions of networks in several different countries. On top of that, Nickelodeon was the highest rated children's network since 1995. So Nickelodeon was dominating the children's content, specifically because of Nicktoons. And at this point, they were riding the success of, I think Rugrats was the show that was the most popular at the time before SpongeBob dropped. And I would also say, from what I was able to find, Nickelodeon did a great job marketing SpongeBob. There was a lot of anticipation for the show, and the first episode, which includes Help Wanted, Reef Blower, and Tea at the Tree Dome, aired after the 1999 Kids' Choice Awards, which obviously had a huge viewership. So I think Nickelodeon was very intentional about setting up SpongeBob for success. However, I think that's really all they contributed, because no matter how much you try to set up a show for success, that doesn't mean it's actually going to land as well as SpongeBob did. And the reason why SpongeBob landed as well as it did and it became an instant hit is simply because SpongeBob was a good show. Now let's talk about what made SpongeBob so good, starting with the title sequence. The title sequence introduces us to two fundamental aspects of SpongeBob SquarePants as a series: the visual art and the concept of nautical nonsense. The visual elements in the title sequence come together to showcase the distinct SpongeBob art style. The first shot of every episode is an oil painting that was painted by an artist named Calvin Leong, forgive the pronunciation, specifically for the series. Then, as the sequence progresses, we see things like brushstrokes on environmental elements, like SpongeBob's pineapple, and the coral that act as flowers in this world. We're also introduced to those tropical checkered backgrounds. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, but I'll put a picture up just for reference. And then we are finally introduced to that infamous SpongeBob font. All of these visual elements come together to make SpongeBob distinguishable from other cartoons. In fact, I would even wager that if we took a screenshot from SpongeBob without any characters, and we took a screenshot from a bunch of other cartoons without any characters, we would probably be able to separate and identify the Spongebob screenshot at least easier than some of the other shows.
If nautical nonsense be something you wish.
As a cartoon, nonsense is expected within SpongeBob. However, that simple yet effective adjective, nautical, really sets SpongeBob apart from other series. Setting SpongeBob underwater immediately differentiates him and his aquatic antics from other series that typically take place in more realistic settings. The underwater setting also lets writers play around with new concepts that give the show a unique charm. Think about all of the times fire appears in the show and how it's handled almost differently every time it comes up. The underwater setting also lets writers create variations of our reality that are familiar enough that they don't need to be explained, but so distinctly SpongeBob that they are recognizable and referenceable outside of the show. I also imagine that the ambiguous setting of Bikini Bottom makes SpongeBob more relatable for children outside of the United States. But I am American, so non-Americans correct me if I'm wrong on this point. But overall, from the title sequence, we can very clearly see that SpongeBob SquarePants as a series has a strong identity. Speaking of identity, I just had to bring up Chowder. The dynamic prints on characters' clothes, everything being food themed, the theme song. Chowder just has such a strong identity as a series. I love Chowder. Funnily enough, the creator of Chowder, C.H. Greenblatt, also worked on SpongeBob. So next time you're watching SpongeBob, keep an eye on the opening credits and see if you can catch Greenblatt's name. While the SpongeBob title sequence establishes the series' identity, the episodes themselves reinforce it through storytelling. In storytelling, there are 5 essential elements: character, conflict, plot, setting, and theme. And classic SpongeBob leverages each of these 5 elements to craft really amazing and memorable stories. Characters are the backbone of your story. Their motivations inform the conflict and drive the plot. So their purpose in a story is to basically make the plot progress. SpongeBob himself, albeit childish, is an diligent, optimistic, and compassionate little dude. He works hard, he sees the best in others, and he cares about others, even those who don't care about him. And yes, I'm looking at you, Squidward. And honestly, that's why Squidward and SpongeBob are often paired together, because SpongeBob's attitude is a foil to Squidward's more sedity attitude.
Who cares about the customer?
I do!
Well, I don't!
Squidward.
Conflict and plot go hand in hand. Conflict is the obstacle to a character's goal. And plot is then the series of events to overcome or fail to overcome said obstacle. In Rock Bottom, SpongeBob's goal is to return home. However, the conflict, or at least one of the conflicts in the episode, is that he can't understand the language. So then the plot revolves around SpongeBob's attempts to overcome this language barrier and return home.
I can't understand your accent.
Setting is the time and place where a story takes place. You can also think of setting as the environment that contextualizes the plot. In Rock Bottom, SpongeBob is forced to a new location because the plot wouldn't have made sense if he were in regular old Bikini Bottom. He is forced outside of Bikini Bottom to a place that is unfamiliar, dark, and scary, so the struggle with the language barrier and picking up on the customs makes more sense. And this setting also challenges an aspect of SpongeBob's character, which is his naivety. But that's why the theme or the underlying message, or you can even say lesson of the episode is so impactful. At the end of Rock Bottom, the anglerfish brings SpongeBob's balloon back, and that balloon is actually how he ends up getting home. And so from all of SpongeBob's experiences and the resolution of the conflict, we're able to pick up that the theme of this episode is tolerance. So from the episode of Rock Bottom, we're supposed to learn to be accepting of people who are different from us and not judge them so quickly like SpongeBob initially did.
I get it. Balloon travel. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As you can see, all of these storytelling elements are intertwined. And in good storytelling, like what we see in classic SpongeBob, all of these storytelling elements are strong. However, there are two more things that really help SpongeBob knock it out of the park and become a household name. And those things are the pacing and the humor.
Well, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this thing.
Wouldn't that be the top?
Pacing is the speed at which your story unfolds. And an aspect of pacing is balancing the detail that you give your audience. So if you give too much detail, you risk creating an overly convoluted story. But if you don't give enough detail, it's harder for the audience to engage with the story or the world you're presenting. In reference to SpongeBob, the average runtime of an episode is 11 minutes, which isn't really that much time in the grand scheme of things. On top of that, SpongeBob is an episodic series, meaning that the episodes are self-contained. So writers can't rely on information from episodes outside of the one that's currently showing at the moment. So how do the SpongeBob writers establish the characters, the conflict, the setting, and convey a theme to tell a well-paced, well-written story within 11 minutes? They get nonsensical. Walk with me, stay with me, stay with me. When the plot needs to move forward, but there is not an obvious way how, things get random. In SpongeBob, like many other cartoons, nonsense is a plot device. In season 3's The Camping episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are protected from the sea bear attack by a circle drawn in the sand. This circle is a ridiculous solution, but it's effective because it allows the plot to progress without needing a lengthy explanation. And so that brings me to the first type of humor in SpongeBob, which is plot-relevant humor. I would also say plot-relevant humor is the most common type of humor. As we can see from the sea bear circle example, pacing and humor really go hand in hand. I would say because they're both connected to timing. I kind of think of pacing as something that sets the tempo and humor as something that follows that tempo. But all that being said, this isn't to say that plot-relevant humor is the only type of humor in SpongeBob. Sometimes jokes are made just to be funny because, well, SpongeBob is a cartoon.
Hey, a note!
Yeah, but turn it over. There's a letter.
You're right.
Other jokes are gags, or more specifically, visual gags, like when we see those super detailed close-up shots. Fun fact, an extremely close-up shot of something disgusting is known as a gross-up. In animation, these shots are often drawn with more detail than the regular series. Ren and Stimpy is credited as being the show that popularized the shot, and its co-creator Bob Camp is the one who coined the term gross-up. In the case of SpongeBob, I feel like they use a mix of gross-ups and just really nice, high art detail shots, which I think is so fun. The humor of classic SpongeBob is plot relevant and or well-timed. Jokes land more often than they miss because they aren't disruptive to the flow of the plot. They also aren't made too frequently, which is something that I can't really say for later seasons of SpongeBob. But the witty humor from that classic era of SpongeBob is why the jokes live on long after an episode has ended.
The sash ringing, the flash singing, the bash pinging.
The half-slinging slasher!
Even though SpongeBob is a series meant for kids, I appreciate that the humor wasn't dumbed down in early seasons. In fact, I would say that including those more intellectual, wit-based jokes really had children rise to the occasion, and they ended up learning a lot, at least about comedy, from SpongeBob. When I watched the early seasons of the show, I can tell that a lot of care went into producing a high-quality series. The humor combined with the storytelling and the art really solidified SpongeBob's legacy. The quality is why SpongeBob was such a breakout hit and why it still has such a strong cultural impact even almost 30 years later.
Krusty Krab is unfair! Mr. Krabs is in there! Standing at the concession! Plotting his oppression!
After season 4, there is a noticeable dip in episode quality. Other SpongeBob fans have already done the work and time to analyze these bad episodes and break down their flaws, so I'm not going to offer my own analysis. However, I will say that the consensus is that SpongeBob moved more towards mean-spirited humor in the middle of the show's run, and in more recent years, it has moved towards more gag-heavy humor. Jokes often miss the mark, and the show is near overstimulating now.
It's you!
I don't want to be disingenuous by saying that every post-season 4 episode is bad, because that's simply not true. I could make a video on all of the post-season 4 episodes I enjoy and why. So if you want that video, let me know. However, it's very clear that the average quality of an episode after season 4 is below the average quality of the season 1 through 4 episodes. And before the comments come in, yes, I know that Steven Hillenburg wanted the SpongeBob movie, the 2004 SpongeBob movie, to be the finale of the series. And I know that he left the series after that movie release. However, I think it's crazy to act like Steven Hillenburg leaving is the reason why SpongeBob just went downhill. Like, people are really acting like Steven Hillenburg was the gatekeeper of quality for SpongeBob. I know he executive produced the show during its golden era, and I know that he created SpongeBob and he had certain rules for the series. However, I think acting like he is the only person that was committed to creating a quality show, one, is a disservice to the rest of the creative team. And I also think that a lot of people just aren't really understanding how the business of television works. Also, it's important to note that Steven Hillenburg did come back to the show. He came back in 2015 around the second half of season 9, and he worked on the Sponge Out of Water movie. And then he worked on the show from his return in 2015 until he passed in 2018. Rest in peace to Steven Hillenburg, and thank you to him for creating such a cultural phenomenon. But I say all that to say that, once again, Steven Hillenburg wasn't like the guardian of the quality of SpongeBob. And I think that acting like a show's creator is the one person that can produce quality content for that series is a little crazy. But there are what I think 3 different reasons as to why SpongeBob evolved and changed the way it did. The first reason why I think SpongeBob went downhill is what I like to call the curse of success. When a series has been going on for as long as SpongeBob has, it becomes difficult to create new episodes that are true to the original flavor of the series while also being relevant in modern times. That's why with SpongeBob, we see a lot of callbacks to previous episodes, episodes that reference other media outside of the show, and just we get generally forgettable plots. The problem is with these bad episodes, they just don't have a lot to say. And whatever they do say oftentimes ends up only being possible because of flanderization. And so flanderization is basically when a trait from a character is taken, exaggerated, and blown up to the point where it becomes that character's entire personality. So you can think of flanderization as just diluting a character. For longtime SpongeBob fans, this character dilution kind of serves as a barrier to entry to the newer episodes. Because for longtime fans, they don't really like seeing some of the characters that they previously liked or were even their favorite characters be misrepresented in such a way. Now, these issues, and specifically the issues that come from the curse of success, are not unique to SpongeBob. This happens a lot with long-running series. It's happened with The Simpsons, it's happened with Family Guy, it's happened with The Fairly Odd Parents, and there's several other series out there that it's happened to. Off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 series that this hasn't applied to, which are Adventure Time and, so far, Bob's Burgers. And actually, let me go knock on wood, because if I just jinx Bob's Burgers, I don't know if I would be able to forgive myself, because I love Bob's Burgers. It's such a breath of fresh air in the adult animation world. But anyways, back to the curse of success. When it comes to long-running series, it becomes difficult to recognize the series' identity with cultural shifts that are happening in real life. Which brings me to my next point. The second reason why SpongeBob has changed is simply because times have changed. Back when SpongeBob was first airing, we were in the era of TV and cable television. And so shows, specifically cartoons, often had to appeal to a wide demographic to get watched. They, as in the show writers, knew that there was a wide demographic of people watching. And so they had to put stuff in for everybody, really. That's why early SpongeBob had the silly things that would be appealing to the younger audience, but the more mature scenarios and jokes that the older audience would find funny. And this is something that's common for cartoons. I mean, have y'all thought about all the adult jokes that are in cartoons? Like, this ain't nothing new. But that was then, and this is now. Now, we're in an era of personal devices and streaming, which means that everyone in the family can watch what they want to watch, when they want to watch it. And so the show writers now have either like the blessing or the curse of being able to write specifically for their target audience. And in this case of SpongeBob, the target audience is kids. So despite the older and longtime SpongeBob fans not really vibing with the direction the series has gone, it's profitable. It's making Nickelodeon money because that's exactly what the kids these days find funny. And there are specific reasons why the humor that we see in these modern SpongeBob episodes is what the kids are finding funny. The last reason why SpongeBob changed is because of something I'm calling digital development. And before I get into digital development, just know that I'm gonna like explain a lot of this stuff and then I'm gonna relate it back to SpongeBob. I promise you it's related to SpongeBob. Just stick with me. So I'm using the term digital development to describe how Generation Alpha, as the first generation to grow up in a fully digital world, is developing preferences and behaviors that are different from previous generations. And so there's two big aspects of digital development that I want to talk about because I feel like those are the ones that relate to SpongeBob the most. And that's the moderation and monitoring aspect and the media consumption aspect. Within Gen Alpha, social media usage and video gaming are very popular. These two uses of the internet are also very difficult to moderate. If you think about social media and video games, these are both services that rely on retroactive moderation. So think of like you might see an offensive post on social media, or you might interact with somebody in the game that's doing something inappropriate or just not what the game is designed for. Nothing really happens to that post or to that player unless it is reported. And so even though social media platforms can have their initial scans for content that might not match their like community guidelines or content standards or whatever it is, it's still possible to circumvent those checks and preliminary scans, especially because not some things that are detrimental to children aren't always immediately obvious. And then something similar can happen with video games. So just for reference, the social media platforms that Gen Alpha favors are YouTube Shorts and TikTok. And the games that are most popular from what I could find are Roblox, Fortnite, and Minecraft. So just once again, just to add that context, but social media and video gaming are difficult to moderate because they are retroactively moderated. But when a child is playing this game or on this platform, they're not aware of what is in violation of the community guidelines for whatever they're using. And so they're more likely to just like see this stuff. And then if they see it frequently enough, they're more likely to accept it as something that's okay to say or do. And that's where the monitoring aspect comes in. It's difficult to moderate what a lot of Gen Alpha is doing on the internet because they have personal devices. So 1 in 4 Gen Alpha kids have a personal device, a personal cell phone by age 8. And so unless the parent is just standing there watching what the kid is doing on their phone 24/7, you can't monitor that. And yeah, you could try to set limits and restrictions, but these kids are smart. They know how to circumvent that stuff. I saw this one video of this boy, he was like maybe 3 or 4 years old, but he kept getting on YouTube and his mom was trying to figure out how he kept getting on YouTube. Whole time, he was going on Call of Duty Mobile, clicking an embedded YouTube video, and then the YouTube video would upload in the browser, and then he was like, it was fair game for the rest of YouTube from there. And that's an aspect of growing up in a world that's fully digital. You have a native familiarity with technology that older generations don't. And so that's why I say the way that Gen Alpha interacts with the internet is difficult to moderate and difficult to monitor. Social media and video games are retroactively moderated, and parents really don't have the time to watch what their child is doing on their phones 100% of the time. And even if you take the phone, or even if you don't let them have a personal device, there's still kids at school that have these devices. So it's kind of like, it's really kind of inevitable. Then to the second aspect of digital development that I want to talk about, media consumption. A lot of Gen Alpha has trust in their favorite content creator or influencer. We as adults know that this is problematic because, well, if you're an influencer, your goal is to incite some form of action, whether that's to buy a product, whether that's to believe something. That's the type of, like, you're trying to influence somebody to do something. With children, they don't know when they're being advertised to, or they might not have the skills to differentiate somebody that they like between somebody that they can trust. On top of that, the content that Generation Alpha consumes, they have a preference for short form content. As I mentioned, their preferred platforms are YouTube Shorts and TikTok. So short form content by design is supposed to be highly stimulating so that, you can grab someone's attention when you only have like a few seconds to get them to engage with your content. So Generation Alpha is consuming media in a way that is, they're not sure what to internalize and what to not internalize. And they are also consuming a lot of short form content. So they're internalizing these preferences for that short form, high stimulation content. Which brings me back to SpongeBob. I told y'all it would come back to SpongeBob. SpongeBob, at least in the newer seasons, is very highly stimulating. There's lots of sound effects, or there's more frequent sound effects. There's lots of exaggerated facial expressions in animation. And even the show is colored in a way that's kind of more saturated than previous seasons. So all of this is designed to be highly stimulating. And that is a direct appeal to what Gen Alpha, the current generation of kids, likes. So because of digital development, like, let me take you through it. Because of digital development, these kids are using the internet in a way that is difficult to moderate and monitor. And so this means that they are indiscriminately internalizing a lot of the content that they come across on the internet and a lot of the behaviors that they're coming across on the internet. So when they are watching TV, they want to see something that is reflective of this preference that they've built from the content that they've consumed, or the preference that they built from digital development.
These are not pets! These are wild animals! And you can get seriously injured.
Okay, so even though I just outlined the 3 reasons why SpongeBob changed, I'm still annoyed by the fact that SpongeBob just really fell from grace. And I think it's like they really fumbled the legacy. I know that, especially when it comes to digital development, like the shift in the series is simply in response to what's profitable, but that just makes me even more irritated, because if everybody is producing this slop, high stimulation content for children, then who is going to create the high quality content that's going to counteract this wave of short form, sloppy, just low quality, just mess. It's mess. I said it. It's mess. I feel like there's everything, like profit is, and I know this, but it's like profit is outweighing integrity. And when I see it happen, even though I know that's how it's going to work because of capitalism, like it just grinds my gears. My recommendation, if you got some kids, for whatever time they spend online gaming or whatever time they spend watching YouTube Shorts or TikTok, double it and make them watch PBS Kids. To summarize today's lecture, the reason why SpongeBob is so iconic as both a character and a series is simply because the early seasons were good in all regards. The evolution of the series is a direct reflection of the shifts in our culture in real life. And the newest version of SpongeBob is a symptom of a larger struggle to define healthy child rearing in a digital world. I feel for today's kids, and I think they deserve better. To the longtime SpongeBob fans or the older SpongeBob fans, I hope this video helped you articulate what you love about the show and why you maybe don't like it as much now. If y'all get the opportunity, put the youth on to the classic SpongeBob. Let them know what they were missing out on. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. And with that, class is dismissed.